already. I'm here. It's my first time preaching this semester, so you have to relearn how to do the microphone. Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to start with Micah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Hear what the Lord says. Rise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills hear your voice. Hear, you mountains, the controversy of the Lord, and you enduring foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a controversy with his people, and he will contend with Israel. O my people, what have I done to you? In what have I wearied you? Answer me. For I brought you out from the land of Egypt, and redeemed you from the house of slavery. And I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. O my people, remember now what King Balak of Moab devised, what Balaam son of Beor answered him, and what happened from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the saving acts of the Lord. With what shall I come before the Lord, and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, and the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, the last couple weeks we've been preaching from the lectionary, which means that there's like a set couple of verses that are each week. There's one from the Old Testament, one from the New Testament, a psalm, and then something from the Gospels. And preaching from the lectionary is a lot different from what we were doing a lot last semester, which is where we were doing a little bit more sermon series. And it's good and bad. Sometimes you read the verses that are for your week to preach, and you're like, oh no, what am I supposed to do? And sometimes you read it, and you're like, oh great, this will be easy. It never ends up being easy, regardless of which one you end up finding. But sometimes it's a little simpler than other weeks to pick which one you're going to preach on. And this week, I read the lectionary like 2 weeks ago, and I was pretty excited because this is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. I'd heard it I guess maybe I'd heard it before, but I had heard a sermon on it for the first time this summer, and I just really, really enjoyed it because I think it's about uncomplicating things. And I think, at least for me, my life is like a constant cycle of getting more complicated and then getting less complicated and then finding the middle. Especially being in college, there's all kinds of new opportunities. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And then I think, oh, no, I should do this too. And then this pendulum swings way over here, and suddenly I'm doing 12 different things, and it's way too many. And then I realize that, and so I take a bunch away, and then it goes way over here, and I'm bored. And that's a problem too, because then I don't get stuff done. I'm like, I have hours to do that. So I wait until I have 10 minutes to do it, and then I take care of it. And I think that sometimes that's how our faith can be. It's like a cycle, a pendulum swinging back and forth, trying to figure out where exactly you need to be. You could be way over here on this side, where you're very focused on specifically what it means to be a Christian, and following this rule or following that rule, or you can be swinging way over here, and just kind of not really investing in your faith, in your relationship with God, any of those sort of things. And then you have to find a way to swing it back to the middle. And to find that place where you follow what God says and you're loving Him and loving His people well. And it's a constant kind of back and forth and knowing where to go. At least that's what it is for me. I don't know how other people look at it, but that's kind of how it feels for me. I go back and forth a lot. And I think this verse in Micah is really, really helpful for bringing you back to the middle. Because it helps uncomplicate things. It doesn't make things easy, but it makes them less complicated. It makes them simple. Micah lays out in 3 simple chunks what exactly God's looking for. And those things are definitely not easy to do, but they're simple to understand. And so I read a whole lot before those 3 things happened. So just for a little bit of context, Micah was a prophet, so he's speaking to the people. And he is telling them that they really screwed up. And they need to do better, otherwise God's, going to punish them because they're not following His rule, they're not following His law, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And Micah comes along and says, like, hey, stop doing this. And the whole book, it's not very short, it's 8 chapters. He is pretty much goes through a cycle of telling them, you did this bad, so this is going to happen, followed by some kind of lamenting where he's sad because he's worried about his people, so not listening. And he is part of those people. And then hope. So those 3 kind of segments happen, not necessarily in that order, but throughout the whole book, Micah goes between those 3 things. And this part is kind of both. It's a little bit talking about kind of that, what have you done, why are you doing this, and then following it up with hope at the end. Because he starts with talking, the first section of that verse where it's like the people are on trial. And God is saying, what have I done to you? And did I not save you? Did I not send people to help you? And they're saying, and the people aren't answering, Micah's just speaking for God. And he's asking and pleading with them, what is wrong? What's the problem here? With the idea that God hasn't done anything wrong, obviously. It's the people that have stepped aside. And then Micah finishes it with kind of like a response of what the people are saying. And it's this idea of like, what do you want, God? And the people aren't necessarily asking this because some of them are not repentant yet. Some are listening to Micah, and some are not. But Micah is speaking for them and saying, okay, so you want to repent, how do you do that? How do you get back to God? And this is kind of an interesting thing because there's this idea of like, you can't do anything to make God love you more or love you less, but you can pursue a strong relationship. You can pursue doing what God wants you to do so that you can love Him and love His people well. And this is where Micah lays it out. He says, God's not looking for rivers of oil. He's not looking for you to bring animals to sacrifice. He's not looking for you to bring money to the offering plate specifically. But instead, He's looking for you to act like the people that He loves, to act like His chosen people, to love each other in the way that He said you're supposed to love each other. And again, it's not easy, but He lays it out into 3 chunks. And we're going to go through the 3 different chunks and talk about those, each individually. I use 2 different translations because I like the wording in some of them better than others, which isn't necessarily great biblical scholarship, but that's okay. John and I can discuss it later. But there's 2 translations I kind of use, and one uses do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. The other one is act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And one of the other things I was reading, some scholars translate humbly as carefully. So, lots of words going on, but don't worry, we're going to break it down. So the first one is do justice, or act justly. Now this is an interesting way to start it, because it starts right away with an action, a very, very specific action, but also a very complicated action, because what does justice mean? How do we know who's in the right, who's in the wrong? I don't think we know the answer to that. I think a big part of it is looking out for the least of these. That's something that Jesus always did. He looked around for the people that had been pushed aside, for the people that had been pushed down. And doing justice means picking those people back up. It means talking to those people, naming those people who have been unnamed, who have been said to be the other throughout whatever means, whether it's simply because of distance, because they are in a nursing home, they've been pushed aside, or because, they don't wear the right clothes, or they're really loud and obnoxious in one of your classes, and this doesn't apply to most of you, but for me, I got some small classes, and there's a couple people that I'm like, oh my goodness, stop talking, that's not helpful. But that's also not a good way to love them. Instead, you can just listen. I'm in the College of Communication and Information Sciences, which is like a really small college on campus. So a lot of people, I had them class after class after class, and I've had many classes for 3 years kind of spread around. And sometimes I look at the class roster and I'm like, oh, really gonna have to practice my deep breathing in this class. And that's not doing justice, right? It's not acting acting justly. And you can see it. There's a specific boy who's in one of my classes, and I had him in 2 classes last semester, and he doesn't quite read social cues very well all the time. So he means really well, but sometimes he just raises his hand and talks, even if it's a 300-person lecture class, which is not really, what you typically do. And it's amazing to watch the different responses. Because you can look around that 300-person lecture hall, and you can see some people just sitting, relaxed, listening, and letting him speak. And then you can see other people rolling their eyes, sighing, being exasperated. And I've been on both sides of that. I fully admit it. Sometimes this boy raises his hand and I'm like, ah. And other times he raises his hand and like, he's just trying to figure it out, just like the rest of us. It's okay. We have an hour and 15 minutes. We'll get through it. And that idea of doing justice is making sure that that boy feels just as paid attention to and just as well taught and well loved by the professors in the class as the rest of us who sit there quietly. And sometimes he asks questions that the rest of us have and we just didn't ask and we just didn't want to know the answer to because we wanted to just figure it out on our own, go about our own business, like not worry about it. So there's people like that all around you that you're like, I don't know what justice is. And sometimes you don't have the patience for justice. But God and Micah is saying here, do justice, act justly. Those people that are pushed down and to the side, pick them up, sit there and listen and hear them. Give them a name, be their friend. Even when it's something that you're like, I just don't want to. He's saying right there, find the people who justice is not being done to, who have been pushed aside, and go pick them up. Now the next part of it is love kindness or love mercy. And this is kind of interesting because you start with a very much an action word, doing. And then the next one, love is also an action, but it's not as explicit, right? It's very, you can tell somebody like, go do that, go do the dishes. Go love the dishes, what's that? It's not very specific. So why exactly is love the word used here? And I think that love, that's the key part of it, is that when you love something, you make it a way of life, right? So I have parents and a brother, and my brother, when we lived in the same house, would do so many things that just exasperated me. We had to share a bathroom growing up, and he also gave me a ride to school. And he would shower in the morning, which takes a long time, but he also was a senior when I was a freshman. So he waited until the last minute to get out of bed, get in that shower, and then drive us to school. And he did not care if we arrived at school. School started at 7:30. He was fine if we arrived at 7:29. I was a brand new freshman. I'm very small. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I'm rather small.
We know.
Okay, good. I didn't know if it was just me. But high schoolers are very large and scary when you're a freshman. And like, it's intimidating to walk through the halls and get to your classes on time. And my brother would roll up to the parking lot at like 7:29. We'd have 1 minute to get to our locker, get to class. It was a lot. It was good for me because I'm very type A. Very much like things to be a specific way. And my brother forced me to not do that. I'm sure he didn't see it as helping me grow. And I definitely did not in the moment, but it's better now. But he would just annoy me so much. We'd be sitting, he'd be eating his breakfast at 7:25. I'd be like, we have to leave. School starts in 5 minutes. He's like, oh, it's fine, we're gonna get there. I was like, Wes. But I still love him, right? I still call him, I still talk to him, I still got in the vehicle with him. I was perfectly capable, I'm sure, of finding another ride, of walking to where the bus stopped. But instead, I kept following him. And that's the idea of love, right? If I didn't love him, I sure as heck would not have gotten in his vehicle at 7:25 so we could get to school at 7:29 and then like panic run through the hallways, right? But because I love him, now I can laugh it's not a big deal. Now, loving kindness, it's not the same as loving a person, but it's a similar concept. It's putting things aside that are difficult and making it your life. I'm sure everybody has somebody that they love that does something that just drives you crazy, but you're able to put it aside just so that you can, those are ridiculous. Clearly you guys all have someone that you love that does something that bugs you. I know, I can see it, but you still love them, right? So that's the key here. Because even if somebody throws their socks on the floor, my roommates never do their dishes. Even if they never do their dishes, you still love them. You still want to be around them. You still want to interact with them. That's what loving kindness is that you do everything you can so that your life is kindness. The other word here is mercy, in other translations. To make your whole life mercy. People that don't necessarily, in your mind, deserve your kindness, you give it to them anyway. Because first of all, you don't get to decide who deserves what. And second of all, you love it, so it is your way of life. Now you can kind of pair this idea of loving kindness or mercy with doing justice. Sometimes when you are acting justly, when you are doing justice, when you are lifting people up that have been pushed aside, there's someone that pushed them aside. You have to love being kind to them and giving mercy to them just as much as that person that you picked up. That's kind of twofold there. But it's also kindness in general. Again, making it your way of life. Now finally, we've got walk humbly or carefully with your God. This one to me is the most, it's like the best one, but also the most confusing. What does it mean to walk humbly? Grace always tells me I'm a very aggressive walk. I don't know what that means, but apparently I walk very aggressively, not humbly. So I'm not sure exactly how that works. But maybe the other translation, walking carefully with your God. Perhaps that makes more sense. I think they kind of work in tandem. And it's really hard to figure out what exactly that looks like. And I think part of it is that it's different for every person. Some people, in order to stay close to God, have to follow a very specific routine, because that is who they are as a person. They need to reorient. They need to make sure that they're focused. Other people take a different approach to relationships and are more spontaneous. They're more kind of laissez-faire with how they are. Not that they are taking a relationship with God and not being serious about it, but rather that it is a more in-the-moment sort of thing, versus some people that have to be very studious about it, and then that's how their relationship with God can grow better for them. The big thing about this is walking humbly or carefully with your God means being with God. You can't do those first two. You can't do justice, you can't love kindness without God. And we talked, doing justice and loving kindness isn't always easy. Sometimes the people that you need to love are the hardest people to love. We did a huge sermon series on that last semester. Sometimes that's not easy. So if you're not walking humbly with God, you can't do it. You can't do it on your own. It's not possible. Another part of that is not assuming that you know the answers. Walking humbly with your God means that you are doing your best to follow what He says. You're asking Him to help you follow what He says. You're asking Him to help you walk humbly with God. Asking Him to help you love kindness and act justly. Because you can't do it alone. And sometimes you can't see where justice needs to be done. You can't see where someone has been pushed aside because you're not paying attention, or just because they have been pushed aside. They're off to the side, and you don't know where to go. And so walking humbly, part of that is going to God and asking Him, what do I need to be doing? How can I do that better, God? Another dimension to this idea of walking humbly is these people that Micah's talking to. They're about to go into exile. And things are kind of about to fall apart for them. They don't know this, and about to is like a grand time scheme. It's not tomorrow. But these people as a body are about to go through a lot. And they will feel at times like God is not walking with them. Part of this idea of walking humbly is that you're turning around to realize that God's been with you the whole time. It's that moment where God is walking humbly with you, but you've got to turn around and realize and remember that you need to do that too. Now, Micah had only 8 chapters to say these things. So the order matters. Every single word that he says is important. When you've got a short time, everything you say has got to be really important. And people don't always remember things, right? Sometimes sermons I preached last semester or last year, I don't remember very much of them. And I preached them. I studied them. I sat and preached them in my head for 2 weeks or a week, depending on what was going on. And I only remember one sentence, one word, one paragraph of it. That's it. So this order, Micah's got to be able to put it so that people remember it, right? So I think the reason that this order is here is incredibly important and important to look at. He starts off with do justice. It means the number one thing is to help those people. It's to make sure that people are loved. Jesus did this all the time. All the time, when he was healing on the Sabbath, right? There's a couple times where he heals on the Sabbath and the Pharisees are like, you can't do that. Why would you do that? He's like, because they needed healing. The day's not important. They were sick or they were lame. There's specifically a man with a wrist that's like withered, or hand. And the Pharisees are like, ooh, I don't know, is he going to heal him? It's like this weird play-by-play, Super Bowl today. It's like the sports commentator, like, I don't know, is he going to heal him? Is he not going to heal him? Not sure what's going to happen. And Jesus knows that they're over there whispering about it. He's not worried. Essentially, he's deal with you later, is what he says, He doesn't say that, but what happens is he acts. He does justice. He goes and heals the man. And then he goes and talks to them. Because what was most important is not worrying about what they thought, what they were doing, what they were worrying about, but it was to help the people that needed help in the first place. That's what do justice is first. Then it follows with love kindness or love mercy. Now this is the middle because it's really the meat of it. Again, loving means making something a part of your life. It means you do it even when you don't want to do it. Even when your brother's eating cereal at 7:25. You're still doing it. And finally, walk humbly with your God. It's the end because it's the whole thing. A lot of times, all of the sermon, a lot that I've been to, all I remember is the benediction. Right? Maybe you remember the opening line. Probably everything else, gone. Sometimes all I remember is the benediction. My dad the other day was quoting this thing from a sermon our pastor gave, and he was like, if you had a coupon, right, you would give it to the person behind you. If you had a coupon that they needed, you'd give it to them. He was like, so I use that all the time in my life. He was literally talking about coupons. I was like, Dad, that's not what this sermon was about. He was like, okay. So sometimes you remember things that are just not the point, or you just remember the end. That's why Micah ends with walk humbly with your God. Because if you're there, if you're walking humbly with God, everything else will follow. And if you're not there, you can't do any of the rest of it. It's the most basic part, and it's really everything. Now I'm going to read the last bit of that verse one more time and close out here. So in my Bible it says what God requires. That's at the head. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you over and over what is good. This is the part where Micah is saying, okay, listen, this is the most important part. If you forget everything else I said in this whole book, right here, listen. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, as we go into communion, be thinking about what walking humbly with your God looks like. What changes do you need to make to a daily routine or mindset? Where do you need to lean on God and look to Him more? What do you need to ask Him in order to do those first two? Now, communion is a time where we can remember when Jesus came and walked humbly with us. So as you are taking communion, being part of that, think about what you need to do to turn around and realize that He's been walking humbly with you the whole time, so that you can do the same. Yeah. Turn it over to you.